Welcome to the All Things Nintendo podcast. I'm Brian Shea, and this is a weekly podcast to discuss all the biggest news and games from the world of Nintendo. As you are likely aware, next week is the release of The Legend of Zelda Echoes of Wisdom, but this week we have some other games to talk about. I want to touch on the Marvel vs. Capcom Fighting Collection, which I've put a little bit of time into, but I've also been playing 3 of the more anticipated indie gems of this fall release schedule. And wouldn't you know it, so has my esteemed guest this week. From the Indie Informer, it's my friend and yours, Jill Grodt. Jill, how are you?
I am doing well. Well, this has been a fantastic week for indie games. I'm excited to jump into it.
Yeah, so we've got some non-indie news to kick us off here, but the main segment and the final segment will largely be devoted to indie titles that both you and I have been playing at home and abroad. So
yes.
Before we jump in, I guess there's a kind of a weirdness here because the last time you were on this show,
yes,
it was
changed.
Apocalypse Eve was when we recorded it. So we recorded it August 1st, and then, totally normal recording, full of amazing indies. I was extremely jet lagged to that point, but I think the episode went well. And then, I woke up the next morning. The episode was completely edited, ready to upload, and the job that I had went away.
It's exploded.
So this is your first time back since then, but
Yeah.
I'm very happy that you're back, and we can have an episode without kind of that specter looming over it.
Yeah. It was so upsetting for a lot of reasons, obviously, but having that joyful moment with you was fantastic. And before going through what we didn't know at the time was going to be a horrible moment, but it is nice to be able to have this sort of redo with you, talk happiness. Oh my gosh. I just, in the middle of thinking that, what if we're like bad karma or something? What if something terrible happens tomorrow?
Why would you put that out in the world? What, like, well, at least the good news is you have full control over if the Indie Informer stays open. So it's not like the rug's not going to get pulled out from under you.
That is a big reason why I started it, Shea. I'm not going to lie.
It's totally understandable. I mean, I think that's why a couple of different spin-offs of Game Informer exist. I mean, why do you think I took All Things Nintendo independent, aside from, not having the bandwidth to do it during the day? It's also, for a situation like this where it's like I can continue it.
And with similar news, I don't think that I have announced on here since being on here last, writing for the Indie Informer now include Charles Hart, Wes LeBlanc, and Marcus Stewart, who is just wild, by the way. His stuff is going up left and right, and watch for that.
Yeah, amazing team you're putting together over there. It's really like an Avengers level squad that you have assembled here.
Yes, that was the plan.
But yeah, and of course yourself. So lots of former GI folks over there.
You never
John
stop
Carson.
being an informer,
Yeah, so go check out the Indie Informer if you have not already. Fantastic work done by the entire team over there. Not the least of which includes yourself, Jill, the Indie Informer herself. So Jill, we're going to kick off with the traditional Pokemon news, but not really the kind of Pokemon news that really we're used to seeing.
Oh, I'm so excited. I think I know what this is.
I'm pretty sure you do. It is indie news, actually, despite being Pokemon. So the Pokemon Company and Nintendo, they have announced officially that it has filed a lawsuit against indie developer Pocket Pair for its game Palworld. So a lot of people, when this game came out, described it as Pokemon with guns. It's obviously a lot more complex than that. But there's a lot of, we'll say, speculation on like some of the designs maybe being heavily inspired by Pokemon designs and like some of the gameplay loops and everything. But Nintendo announced on its Japanese website saying copyright infringement for damages on the grounds that Palworld infringes on Pokemon's patent rights. And then in a comment to Stephen Totillo, he said, Nintendo said it was doing this after, quote, careful investigation of the content. And I noticed this morning, actually, that Stephen Totillo dug up a patent from 2021 filed by Nintendo that showed video game characters throwing items to catch monsters while out in the field. And he speculated, is this maybe the thing that they are kind of suing over? And, how did this news hit you? Because this seems like we've seen so many things derivative of Nintendo creations. I mean, looking at Mario and Zelda in particular, those trailblazed two of the most popular genres in the entire industry to this day.
Mm-hmm.
So how did having kind of the monster collection genre being expanded by Palworld in this way, but now, coming under scrutiny of litigation, how did this hit you?
I don't think anyone is particularly shocked to see Nintendo known for, or Pokemon in general, being known for sort of its litigious nature, going after Palworld in a way that makes a lot more sense to me than maybe other indies or other games kind of taking the idea of a Pokemon and going on with that, because it is so like you could put the models of Pokemon right next to the models for Palworld and really question whether or not these came from different places. It really was pushing the line of like, yeah, wink wink, this is obviously not a Pokemon.
Legally distinct Pokemon, or
Yes,
maybe not legally
maybe
distinct
not
Pokemon.
legally distinct. It was sort of that, like a not, maybe not. I mean, it was so prevalent when Palworld first had its big explosion moment, where people were looking at it and going like, "Hey, uh, Pokemon, you might want to look at this for legal reasons," to the extent that the team actually put out a statement saying, "We are aware of a game that has come
Hmm.
out recently and we're listening to you and we're checking things out." So, like, we had an idea that they knew Palworld existed, that they knew that there might be some concerns here. The only thing I'm a little surprised by is how long it took, but if it took this long and they dug this deep into it, I'm assuming they really have something here, and I am very interested to see how this all plays out.
Yeah, and we know how litigious Nintendo is, but usually that is with fan games, right? Where it's
Mhm.
like a one man development team or one woman development team will create this hey, I made Mario 64 2, and they put it on the internet for 36 hours, and then it's immediately taken down, and that person is getting letters from Nintendo lawyers left and right. And in some cases, in terms of emulation and ROMs, they're going to jail.
Mhm. Yeah.
But this is the first time I can think of Nintendo, at least in recent memory, going after an actual established development team.
Yeah. So they must think they have something. I also want to turn to Haley McLean, who is
Hmm.
a part of MinMax and a video game lawyer, who writes this very interesting reaction to the news on Twitter. Go check her out. She says, "What's intensely fascinating about game mechanic patents finally being enforced and not just sat on for strategy is how public facing the parties are being for PR reasons. In almost no other industries do parties announce patent enforcement slash lawsuits this way." Like,
Hmm.
it's just another really interesting wrinkle to the way that the video game industry works differently than any other entertainment industry ever. Like, a big part of being a gamer is being involved in like some of the business aspect of it as well. Like, if you're a big like movie buff or something, like you love movies and you can talk about genres, you can talk about the games that are coming out, but you're not like, "Oh man, they're taking this idea and they're going to go to lawsuits." Like, it is a kind of uniquely video game thing to have this be the big news of the day.
Well, it's also interesting because I feel like the games industry is also unique in the sense that people are so part of the team, right? Where it's your team Xbox or your team
Mhm.
Nintendo. It's they latch on to business executives that work at Phil Spencer and Reggie Fils-Aimé, and all these different business executives. And oftentimes the people they latch onto are not the folks that are actually making the games. Like
Yeah.
Reggie is not a game developer, neither is Phil Spencer. Obviously they have say in like the direction of the companies. So it is interesting that like these the fan bases are like really tuned in into like the day-to-day operations. And you see it like with Xbox recently where they're like, "Oh, we're going to publish some of our games on PlayStation and Switch."
Yeah.
And some of the fan base lost their freaking minds because they're like, "No, we want these games on ours." So it's like these are moves that like, you know, if Sony was maybe making like back when like we were still not figuring out if we were going Blu-ray or HD DVD, and Sony was like, "Hey, we're going to put this on HD DVD as well," like this movie that we distributed, like I don't think people would care. But
Yeah.
because of the games industry, people are so like clued in and so like tribalistic that
Yeah.
like they do latch on to the comings and goings of all of these different like business events.
Right. It's like even though the console wars are no longer raging, like we still have the legacy of it like built into the fabric of what it kind of means to be a fan of video games. Um yeah, and you could pick that apart so much. And of course, Pokemon is probably a lot of first people's first video game. Like it
Mm-hmm.
is something that is buried deep within most gamers' hearts. And so that's going to touch a nerve as well. So of course this is going to be huge news, even though it's not particularly like out of left field. I think this is going to be one people are really watching.
Mm-hmm. And what do you think about other games that borrow the Pokemon formula? Like I'm thinking of like other indie titles like Temtem, Koromon, Cassette Beasts,
Cassette
as
Beast.
my guest
Yeah.
last week brought up. Those all come to mind. Do you think that if this lawsuit is successful, that games like that could be in danger?
No, I don't think so because I think there's something very particular with Palworld in that those games that you mentioned borrowed the formula, but they are very much their own sort of games and they marketed themselves in that way and they lean into their own what they bring to the table.
Mm-hmm.
I think Palworld very specifically, it is not Pokemon with guns, as you said, that's reductive. It is a kind of survival game and an interesting one, but it is also kind of built up and kind of leaned on this like wink wink not necessarily not Pokemon situation. So um I think there are real legal reasons to worry about that. I don't know if it's just the formula of like catching people and catching things that is the problem. I think I mean w- I don't think they ever proved or not that there was some kind of AI generation involved with
Yeah.
the models or whatever, but that cloud is still hanging over them.
And
So
yeah, and if Nintendo is able to prove that, like, because I mean, once the lawsuit is off and running, as long as we don't go to settlement, like there is going to be some discovery that might surface the fact that, you know, was AI used? If so, was it trained off of actual Pokemon designs and models? And I mean, that would bring to light a lot of things. It's almost like, you know, they're messing with. I don't even want to call Nintendo a sleeping giant because they're a very aware giant. They're a head on a swivel giant when it comes to these types of things.
mhm.
So, you know, if it does come to light that AI was used in the designs of these and they were trained off of Pokemon designs, and of course, this is a big if. This is nothing that
Right.
has been proven. It's been speculated on. That could be a watershed moment in like generative AI being used in game design. It's almost like, you know, when we saw one of the presidential candidates use AI versions of Taylor Swift endorsing him.
Mhm.
And it was like, oh, this might be the thing that actually turns the tide on like AI being used for stuff. And it sometimes takes like somebody messing with the wrong entity to make like a tide turn in like a legal sense.
Yeah. I mean, that's what I kind of want to follow from this whole thing is not necessarily do Pokemon likes start to go down, but like where does this lead AI? Where do we see legal problems start popping up with like AI and different things? That's what I really want to see.
I mean, if Nintendo, I mean, if one company's going to do it, it's going to be Nintendo. Like they have the resources to like put a stop to that if it is in fact AI. Like we don't know that.
Okay.
It is important
Yes.
to say that. I did love the hard drive article that said Pocket Pair hires identical lawyers with guns.
Yeah.
That was a
Great
good one.
line.
The other big piece of news that set social media ablaze this week in the Nintendo world was an alleged leak of the Switch 2 design. Did you see this, Jill?
Probably. And I was just like, no, it's not, and went on.
Yeah,
But go ahead.
I am very skeptical of this, but I saw it. Andy Robinson of Video Game Chronicle, who, we have covered quite a few of his reports on like the Switch 2 design. But he shared a mock-up that he found on a Chinese website, and even he was like, "Take this with a grain of salt." So I believe him when he says that. But the apparent leak says that it has, the like almost like a 3D printed version of the Switch 2, and it also has the specs, which it says is 256 gigabytes of internal storage, 12 gigabytes of RAM, an additional USB port, a new button that is like underneath the home button on the Joy-Con. And it looks like the Joy-Cons, as the several reports have gone out by multiple outlets, are not rail based, but they're magnetic based.
Hmm.
And a bunch of people started chiming in, including the wonderful wizards over at Digital Foundry, who are fantastic at like picking apart like the technical side of games and like evaluating the performance of several games and consoles. They evaluated like the specs that were alleged in this leak and said that if this is real, we shouldn't really expect a ton from the Switch 2 in terms of performance. Like we should pretty much keep our expectations in check. But if you had to give a percentage of how likely you think this is to be real, what would you say?
It's hard because I think just for self-preservation, anytime I see any of these Switch 2 rumors, I kind of just put them out of my mind as like 100% will never happen. Don't worry about it. And it has multiple good reasons to do that. Like I don't keep thinking about what the Switch 2 is going to be. I'm not disappointed or uh overhyped on it when it does finally come out. But I mean, there's probably a good reason that, you know, this these kinds of rumors, these sorts of things are showing up. Maybe it's just because it gets readers, like it's going to get clicks if you're like, "Oh, this is what the Switch 2 looks like." Um, but yeah, I think what is particularly likely from that report is that the Switch 2 is not going to be this huge boom of all of a sudden you can play all these amazing games and it's going to be so beautiful and it's going to be so responsive and it's going to be so powerful. I do think Nintendo's not particularly interested in that, in going after that market, which
Mm.
I don't know how much you can go after that with like PlayStation and Xbox battling it out for performance and all of that jazz. Um, Especially with like the thing about the Switch that it has like it's cornered the market on like sort of family cozy games and mobile to screen. I don't know if that makes sense. Uh, like the ability to take something on the go or play it in bed and then put it back on your screen and play it is its main like focus. And the fact that of course Nintendo is backing it and it's got all of those major mascots and games and franchises and series that you love from very beginnings of your time with gaming most
Hmm.
likely. So um yeah, I'm not going to be totally surprised if it comes out and this is 100% true, but I'm not going to kind of hang my hat on that either.
Sure. Yeah, and it is. Uh, this seems feasible, but that doesn't mean it's accurate.
Mhm.
Like this, all the stuff that they're showing, it is similar to the things that have been reported on by other outlets. So it's like information that is out there, which could mean it's consistent with, like, you could look at it and be like, oh, that's just further evidence that it's real. But it also could just be some dude that's like sitting in a basement with a 3D printer going like, hey, I'm going to make a thing based on all the rumors and then like guess at like some mid-level console in terms of like the specs. And then like you're like, oh, well, that seems consistent with Nintendo. So it's very hard to like really judge how accurate this is. I
Mhm.
would put it at maybe like 20% that this is like legit. But then again, like, Nintendo, they very well could be sending out the specs to these companies and being like, hey, if you want to make cases or you want to make accessories, here are the specs of this. And somebody might have taken that and like, you know, 3D printed it. But
Right. And
it
also,
seems
like,
unlikely to me.
in that same email, like, "And if you leak any of this, just look at what we're gonna do to Palworld."
Exactly. A reminder that you can support the All Things Nintendo podcast through a variety of ways. The biggest and best way is the Patreon page, where you can come in at the $5 or $10 level and unlock perks like early and ad-free episodes, as well as an entirely separate weekly podcast called All Things Gamers, which covers the entire games industry, but also gives you access to the All Things Nintendo community Discord, where we have some of the best people over there chatting about all our favorite hobby. Jill just joined this week.
Yeah, I didn't realize that I wasn't actually on the Discord. I was like, "Oh, I should probably do that," and then got very embarrassed when everybody was, like, waving hi to me. I'm like, "No, don't look at me. I should have been here already."
Well, we're glad that you were there. And another way that you can help the cause is by checking out the official All Things Nintendo merchandise store on tpublic.com, where you can get shirts, hoodies, coffee mugs, and even magnets. Got one of the N64 inspired magnets on my fridge right now. Look for the link in the description of this show. Jill, we have some more games coming to Nintendo Switch Online, specifically my favorite Nintendo Switch Online catalog, the Super Nintendo.
Bah, bah, bah.
So we've 4 new games that were just announced and are out now. We have Battletoads Double Dragon, which is a crossover game starring 2 of the most iconic beat 'em up franchises of that era. We have Big Run. We have Cosmo Gang The Puzzle, or as it's known in the West, Pack Attack, as my friends over at Nintendo Life pointed out. And then we have, oh boy, hang on, Kunio-kun no Dodgeball Daio Senin Shugo.
Perfect.
So did any of these catch your eye?
Battletoads meets Double Dragon is a really interesting collab that I'm sort of into.
Yeah, I mean it's very like traditional side-scrolling beat 'em up, but like you have the Double Dragon guys and you have the Battletoads, so it's kind of just like over the top in that way. Kunio-kun no Dodgeball Daio Senin Shugo. I'm just gonna keep saying that as fast as I
Yeah,
can, so
I
nobody
loved
can
it.
like pick apart my pronunciation. That looks right up my alley. Did you ever play like the Super Dodgeball games and everything growing up?
If I did, they didn't leave a particular mark on me.
Those games absolutely rule. The one Super Dodgeball, I think it was an arcade game. I think you can actually get it on Switch, like the eShop through like the Arcade Archives, I think they're called, that series. Super super fun. This looks like that, and maybe a little bit more over the top, and like people have like superpower moves and everything, whereas like Super Dodgeball is just kind of like more straightforward. But I'll definitely check that one out. And Battletoads Double Dragon definitely seems like one that I should at least play a little bit of. I didn't play it growing up. I was aware of it growing up, but all 4 of these are available now on Nintendo Switch Online's SNES catalog. Jill, you were recently at PAX West, and we're going to be talking about your time at PAX West near the tail end of this show. Did you get a chance to play Super Mario Party Jamboree?
I did not.
Okay, so I know it was one of the games that Nintendo was showing off alongside Zelda Echoes of Wisdom. Was not aware if you had a chance to get an
It's
appointment.
really
Was
funny. I don't know if you've talked about this or not, but the way that PAX was set up this year, all in one building, which was nice. Um, it was essentially like if you turned one direction, you went to like Nintendo and all of the like kind of AAA stuff. If you turned the other direction, you got all of the room with all the indies and that sort of
mm,
thing.
which
So
one
I
were you
was
hanging out in?
I did make a very concerted effort to walk over to the AAA area, and I was just like,
And you just stuck
"Nah,
your
I'd
tongue
rather
out and spit on the
you
ground.
guys suck."
But Super Mario Party Jamboree, we got previews out of PAX West recently, and goodness gracious, does it sound like it's going to be an incredible Mario Party game? Like a lot of
Yeah.
people are saying it's shaping up to be the best Mario Party game on Switch, which is saying something because Super Mario Party was fine. Mario Party Superstars was phenomenal.
Mhm.
So if Super Mario Party Jamboree can live up to that, I am all in. But we got a new sizzle reel for 5 of the new boards that we are getting in Super Mario Party Jamboree. So we got Goomba Lagoon, which has a volcano that shoots items that fall on spots across the board.
Perfect.
An area that looks like a fishing spots where we see Luigi pulling coins out of the water. The next level is Rainbow Galleria, which is a shopping mall, and it looks like there are flash sales that pop up, and it looks like crowds like rush around the board. I don't know if that means like stars are cheaper or like items are cheaper, or maybe it's just like the crowd pushes you to different spots. It didn't really elaborate. Roll'em Raceway looks like a Mario Kart themed level, which is awesome. I don't think it's officially Mario Kart themed, but like they're all legally distinct Mario Kart, but it's except they're both Nintendo.
Yeah, but I
But
definitely want to see someone get run over. That's
well,
the
everyone's
only
in
requirement.
cars.
Yeah,
Everyone's in cars, and they have boosted dice rolls. So it's like we saw like one of the characters in a car, and they got like a 27 dice roll.
nice.
So I guess they're all moving faster. And then Mega Wiggler's Tree Party, and it's just a giant wiggler in the middle, and you can run across him, and it looks like there are piranha plant spaces that'll like chomp on you and make you drop coins. It also looks like you can ring a bell on the map and it'll cause the giant wiggler to like move, which maybe opens up new areas that you can climb on. And then the final one is King Bowser's Keep, and it looks like there's just a giant Bowser in the middle of it, and it causes all kinds of stuff to happen during the course of the game. We see a Mecha Koopa like explode, and I was like, "Oh, that's bad." And then it's like, "Oh no, here's several coins for the person who made the Mecha Koopa explode." But I had my doubts, given the fact that this is like more of a follow up to Super Mario Party than Mario Party Superstars.
Mhm.
Uh, but this really is shaping up to look pretty great. Are you a Mario Party fan?
I actually am, so I'm really happy to hear a lot of recent Mario parties just getting their accolades, and it looks like they're really taking it seriously instead of it just being a kind of serial, here's the next one, here's the next one, here's the next one. They're giving us things that are different, that are interesting, and that are going to get us excited, and that's cool.
And it feels like they figured it out again. Like they had it so down pat on like the N64 and early
Mhm.
GameCube entries. Then we got like, oh, we need to experiment more with this formula. So that's what we got with like the later GameCube into the Wii, and then especially the Wii U era, where it was like it felt like the series had lost its way. It felt like it was becoming more of a cash grab than like a
Yeah.
thoughtfully crafted series like it was in the early days. I mean, I know that Mario Party has its haters, but I have always found enjoyment. But I noticed that like mid Wii era to like the Wii U era, I was really falling out of love with this franchise. The Switch era has reinvigorated my passion for this series, and I am extremely excited for this one. It comes out on Switch October 17th, and I will absolutely be picking this one up. Um,
Good for your Halloween parties. Let's go.
exactly. Could not be scarier than those final awards that they hand out at the end of the match, right in time for spooky season. So,
Mhm.
Jill, the Sonic the Hedgehog franchise, I'm
Yep.
a fan of this.
Yep.
It has been
Oh, I had no
remastering.
idea.
Yeah, exactly. It's as much of a secret as your love of indies.
Yep.
So they've been remastering a lot of their older games, with the latest that is coming out next month called Sonic X Shadow Generations. But according to an interview with Video Game Chronicle, Takashi Iizuka would like to remaster even more. So in that interview, he says that there are no future plans for the Sonic Advance series to be remastered, but he would love to do it if circumstances are right. And you may recall, Sonic Advance was actually the first Sonic game to make the leap to Nintendo platforms following the Dreamcast discontinuation. So it would actually be cool from this podcast perspective to see them brought to modern systems. So just, for reference, we've gotten remasters of Sonic 1, 2, 3, Knuckles, CD. Those are all part of the Sonic Origins collection. Plus, we got Sonic Colors a few years back. As I mentioned, we're getting Sonic X Shadow Generations this coming October. I don't know if you have any opinion on this whatsoever, but do you have a Sonic game you'd like to see remastered?
I do, but I can't actually remember what it was because when I was a kid, um, it was my favorite Sonic game, and I would play it forever and ever. But I just didn't.
Sonic Heroes?
We'll go with it.
Is
Why
it where
not?
the 3 characters are running along with each other?
Sure.
What system was it on?
Sega handheld.
Okay, so it's probably a Game Gear game, because I doubt you're talking about the Nomad.
I
Um,
You know, you never know.
So
This has
it's
become a test for
is it
you.
a platformer? This is like those 21 question games.
I remember the Bubble Blaster being a particular.
Is it Sonic Chaos then? Sonic Triple Trouble?
I don't know. Is it Shea?
I
You're
don't
the one.
know. Well, if you want to play either of the Game Gear games that I mentioned, you can do it on Sonic Origins Plus, which added the Game Gear versions of a lot of the games to the collection. So
Yeah.
you might already have not a remaster per se, but like an upres and like on the bigger screen. So you might
What
already
would
have your
be
wish.
I assume you've asked me this because you have one in mind, and I would love to hear that.
I mean, I'd like the Sonic Adventure games. I mean, we already have remasters kind of from like the GameCube era when like Dreamcast was discontinued and they brought Sonic Adventure 2 Battle and Sonic Adventure DX over to GameCube. But I would like even if they keep everything the same, just upres the visuals to like almost modern standards. I would be all about that, but that's hard. So I guess the easier answer would be something like Sonic Unleashed. But they would have to do some massaging of those werehog stages. I don't know if you remember
Yeah, actually,
so
yeah, I
they
do.
were very, very slow paced, and I would love it if
Mhm.
there was some way because like those daytime stages where you're just playing as like regular Sonic are among the best modern Sonic levels in the history of the series. But it's just like so poorly paced with the werehog stuff. So but yeah, I mean, I actually didn't have one in the chamber for that, but hey, I'll take it. But I'm
Would you
excited for Sonic
be
X Shadow Generations.
would you be more excited for, like, a grand remastered collection series or something like that, or a whole new attempt at a new game?
Oh, give me Sonic Frontiers 2.
Okay.
That would be my most anticipated Sonic game if they were to announce that like tomorrow. If they were like, if they came to me and they're not going to do this, but if they came to me, they're like, hey, we're deciding where to like allocate our resources next.
And we
Should
need
we
your
do
opinion.
should we do like a remaster collection of like Sonic Adventure 1 and 2 or should we do Sonic Frontiers 2? And I'm being selfish, I'm saying Sonic Frontiers 2.
It's a
However,
hot take, everybody.
if they were to like remake like full remakes of Sonic Adventure 1 and 2, that would probably do gangbusters in terms of like sales. But yeah, who knows how realistic any of those are.
Yeah.
But I do know Sonic Adventure 1 and 2 are very, very important to Takashi Iizuka. Like that was when he really started taking over the franchise. So he has a great affection for it. And, Sonic Adventure 2 was the introduction of Shadow. So this is the year of Shadow.
There you go.
But Jill, are you a Tony Hawk's Pro Skater fan?
I am.
It's so
Would you
much
be
fun.
surprised to learn?
So a couple weeks ago, we covered how the Tony Hawk's Pro Skater Twitter account actually updated its Twitter header
Yes.
image to a special 25th anniversary graphic. And I speculated that it might mean something is coming. Now there's even more smoke here. So I did find this over on Nintendo Life, but Tony Hawk himself appeared on Mythical Kitchen's YouTube channel
Mm.
where they asked him about like the Tony Hawk Pro Skater franchise and he said, quote, I wish I could tell you more, but I can tell you that I've been talking to Activision again. And then he went on to say, quote, we're working on something.
Ooh, that's so close to fire.
That is like this is like a smolder at this point. It has to be
Yeah.
something for the 25th anniversary, right? Any
Mhm.
guesses? Any guesses?
I don't want to, Shay, because if I start guessing and I start getting excited, it's gonna be like, "Oh, we've got a t-shirt out," or something, you know?
He usually gets involved when it's the games himself, I noticed. That the last time he got involved was Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 1 and 2. I am hopeful it is the canceled Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 3 and 4, which you may
Ooh.
recall the development studio a few years ago after they put out 1 and 2, somebody came out and said, "Oh yeah, we were like concepting 3 and 4." But then the studio was folded into like the Call of Duty machine, so they were not able to continue doing that.
Tony
There
Hawk Call
was
of Duty.
yeah, they've added grinding to Black Ops 6.
It's amazing.
That's the most realistic guess I have. I mean, I guess like the ambitious thing would be like Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 6, but like that would be cool, but I think that 3 and 4 would be a bigger hit, honestly. Or like an Underground collection, but I think most people would just want Underground remade, not like Underground 2, because a lot of people
Right.
like look at that one with like rose tinted glasses, when actually if you go back it's like, oh, this one actually wasn't good. But I
Yeah.
would still play it because it was from the glory days of that. But also,
Yeah.
there's, I don't know, that was the one that was centered around like a prank war between Bam Margera and Tony Hawk, and like you chose which team you wanted to be on. I feel like there were some problematic sequences in that, like from a 2024 perspective. So I don't know if they would revisit that one, but who knows? But yeah, I mean, I am extremely excited. The 25th anniversary, I think, is next week. So we might be talking about it on the next episode of All Things Nintendo.
Yeah, let's see. T-shirt confirmed.
Oh, no. But Jill, unfortunately, we have to end the news segment on a bit of a downer note. Annapurna Interactive.
Yes. Oh,
Jill, I've
geez.
often put them up there as one of the best indie publishing houses alongside the likes of like Devolver.
Yeah, certainly one of the
And
biggest. Yeah.
according to Bloomberg, the entire staff has resigned due to a dispute with the owner of the company. And for the people who may not know Annapurna Interactive, they've published games like Donut County. I almost said Donut Country.
I always do
Don't
that.
I always say Donut Country? Donut County, Florence, Gorogoa, which I think is extremely underrated.
Yeah.
Sayonara Wild Hearts, The Artful Escape, which I know you're a particular fan
Yep.
of.
Yep.
Stray, Neon White, Cocoon, Thirsty Suitors, Open Roads, plenty of other ones. So, according to the report, all 25 members walked out and tendered their resignation. Megan Ellison, who is the owner of Annapurna Interactive, put out a statement saying, quote, "The top priority is continuing to support our developing and publishing partners during the transition," and that they're, quote, "committed to not only our existing slate of games, but also expanding our presence in the interactive space as we continue to look for more opportunities to take a more integrated approach to linear and interactive storytelling across film and TV, gaming, and theater." A very robotic response to the fact that your entire staff just
Just
resigned.
quit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But Annapurna Interactive president Nathan Gary, who was among those resigning, said it was, quote, "one of the hardest decisions we've ever had to make." Jill, indies are basically your life at this point. How did you react to this news when it dropped? Because I don't think there
I
was
was
any like indication that this was going to happen. It was just like
no.
all of a sudden Bloomberg was like, the entirety of Annapurna Interactive has resigned.
It's just gone.
Yeah.
Annapurna Interactive is just gone, Shay. And it's like, this is like this is not a thing that happens. This is just I don't know what is going on with this year for things just exploding, but it's literally you're talking about one of the top 3 indie publishers in this space that have a lot of projects, a lot of anticipated projects coming up that all of a sudden like I'm talking with people who are behind the scenes and working on stuff and they're like, yeah, this was not a thing we were expecting. And they're scrambling. And a lot of them seem like they're coming out and saying, like, hey, we're okay. Things are going like, we're going to make this happen no matter what. But like, what a wild, wild thing. You're an indie developer. You've put your heart and soul into something. You've maybe shown up at big showcases because Annapurna has that sort of magic and connections. And suddenly you wake up and you might not be making a game tomorrow, like today. Like that is unbelievable. And I want to read out, I actually tweeted out all of the upcoming games that might be affected by this.
Oh, man.
And it includes Bounty Star, Ghost Bike, Wander Stop, Morsels, Mixtape, which is the next game, by the way, from the Dinosaurs and Beethoven team who did why did that just Artful Escape? Thank you. Blade
Don't thank
Runner.
me. I didn't say anything.
I thank you, Shay, for giving me the answer telepathically. Blade Runner 2033, which was going to be the first Annapurna Interactive developed game. So they were actually working on that. Forever Ago, The Lost Wild, Lush Foil Photography Sim, Skin Deep, To a T, We Kill Monsters, and Project D. Like, that's a list.
Yeah. And, it's interesting, though, because I did... I was, as you might be imagining, I am on the job hunt currently, and I'm on LinkedIn pretty much all the time now, looking at like jobs and everything. And right after this news hit, I did see them listing like, "Hey, we're hiring at Annapurna Interactive," and I'm like, "Oh boy,
I bet you are.
yeah, I bet you are."
It is a sort of weird take to have too, because like as you read, the people who own Annapurna Interactive, which is now an empty vessel, um, are saying like, "Hey, we're totally committed to our projects, and that's great, and we're gonna get like everyone rehired really quickly." And it's like, "Ooh, I actually don't know how." Like, I kind of know how I feel about that, but like, you have these corporate overlords saying like, "We're just gonna replace everybody. It's totally fine." Like,
That's the corporate
without
mindset, typically.
yeah, without thinking about how perhaps the people who were there, maybe you should have worked with them so that they didn't walk off like, what is going on that
Mhm.
everybody walked off this like, Annapurna Interactive, super successful, by all indications going to continue to be super successful. We know that they were sort of negotiating to get spun off into their own independent thing. I wouldn't be surprised if they tried to go that route themselves.
Mhm.
But of course, they're not going to have the backing of the big Annapurna machine, and that's always a problem when you have these big developer spaces suddenly have like large names branch off and try to do their own thing, because suddenly you're like, okay, well, the money is that we're used to having is not there. But also just to think about, we need to have those spaces filled because all of those projects that I just listed need those people to be in place. But it seems so cruel and heartless and horrific to hear them be like, "Don't worry, we're just going to replace them as quickly as possible and we'll be back on track." And it's like, "Ugh."
Yeah.
So, yeah.
What do you think this has like in terms of implications for the world of indie games?
Well, I mean, besides the games that are actively not only being developed, but like Stray was coming out with another port, I believe,
Well, just hit
sometime soon.
Switch
Thank you.
recently.
So, like, how does that work? Is that being supported in any kind of way now? Like all of the other people who were working with Annapurna, maybe there were things in the works that we don't even know about were going on. But in particular, if you kind of like, if you zoom out and look at the indie space right now, it is such a horrible problem for developers to find publishers right now. There is no funding, there is no money. People are desperately trying to hold on until 2025, when hopefully there will be more funding available so that people can get their projects off the ground. To have one of the biggest indie publishers literally just disappear overnight is horrifying, because not only like, all of these games that we're talking about are coming up very soon, and you're talking about people who are making the most connections and projects and propping up a lot of indie space. Um, and also just like the people who are watching this and being like, well, maybe indie publishing isn't a very safe bet, even though I don't know
Yeah.
if anybody thinks indie publishing is a safe bet.
I mean, I think
But
people have looked at how AAA has handled the last year and a half, and like they're like, oh, well, maybe indie games and like lower budget titles is the way to go. But then, like you also, in addition to this news, but I mean, this is a different circumstance. This is the staff
yeah,
resigning
the
in
staff
protest of
resign.
something, presumably.
Right, and we don't
Whereas,
know what that is exactly, which is something that really boggles my mind.
yeah,
You'd think if it was something like on the scale of harassment or something like that, we would have heard about it. So it does seem like it was business related. Like they really wanted to go independent, maybe, because we know they were trying to negotiate for that. But why would you push so hard for independence that everyone just walked off?
I mean, I think this is like shades of when Humble Games went under, and remember, like
Hmm,
Bo
hmm.
Path of the Teal Lotus put out a statement as right
Yeah,
after they launched. They were like, "Hey, we had like patches and everything, but all of that was done through this partnership with Humble, and now like we're still going to try to patch it, but it just might take a little bit longer because we don't know how we're going to get to these platform holders without like our liaison that we had." I'm hoping that's not the case for a lot of these. I mean,
right.
thankfully, there is still somebody working at Annapurna, so like they might be able to put these developers in touch with like the platform holders in the meantime while they like hire back up or try to work it out with the staff that did quit. But it's got to put some of these developers in a really bad spot.
Yeah. And the strain, I wonder, between the Annapurna Interactive name and now all these platform holders who are suddenly like, oh, we don't know if we want to be involved with a company that just like is doing something that makes its entire team want to quit, and then it's very unreliable, and now all of our ideas and plans are thrown off because we don't know, like, people aren't working for you anymore. So like, does this diminish Annapurna Interactive? Do you have this weird situation where you have Annapurna Interactive and all of the people who were the heart and soul of Annapurna Interactive, who've maybe made their own company in the future, like show up at a Keeley event, and now they're in it, now there's some kind of drama. Like, there is a lot to think about as far as the ripples that are going to come from this particular stone getting thrown in the lake.
Yeah, it's it's really sad to see. Thankfully, I mean, the silver lining is that they did it under their own power. It wasn't like
Yeah.
so many of the other studio, you know, I don't want to call them layoffs because this isn't a layoff. It's not like so many of the studio like the mass departures that so many studios and publishers have seen, where it's like they just woke up one morning and suddenly they don't have a job.
Mm-hmm.
This was something that they did under their own volition, presumably in protest. So, I mean, there's a little bit of a silver lining there, that it wasn't like some executive completely detached from the day-to-day operations being like, you guys make too much money and we want to make our stock go up. Goodbye. Like, hopefully, like there is some solace in that, and there is some like that allowed them to plan a little bit for this as well. Because I mean, I don't know about you, but I don't know what's going on with Annapurna Interactive, and I don't know why the entire staff decided to you know, uniformly get out of the company.
Mm-hmm.
But I tend to lean in their favor. I
Yeah.
don't tend to like be like, oh, well, they're obviously in the wrong. The 25 people in solidarity leaving a
Right.
company. I tend to think that they have something, and it was probably the company either being greedy or being unfair to them, because that's how so many companies operate these days. And again, I have no evidence or inside information about that.
Right.
Just a hunch based on
Just
how other companies operate.
just being a human being at this moment in time and knowing how hard it is to exist in the world, choosing voluntarily to leave your presumably financially successful job has to have a very wild reason behind it, a very solid reason behind it. I can't imagine it would be like, can you imagine being the one holdout though? Like, oh yeah, everyone except for the one guy in marketing is left or something, you know? But yeah, that the whole staff just left is something has to be going on. I need someone to tell me. Jason Schreier is the one who broke this story. So if there is something to find, he is known for finding things. And I hope that we hear a little bit more as to what is actually going on beneath the surface. Um, for the whole day after I heard this, I'm like, I just cannot process what I am hearing, because these things just don't happen. You just don't disappear an entire successful large name like Annapurna Interactive overnight, and that's what happened.
Yeah, the hope is that the reason we haven't heard anything is they're keeping it internal in hopes of having it be a bargaining chip to be like, hey, we are prepared to walk. And actually, I mean, that's, you know, negotiation 101. Actually be prepared to walk away from the table if you are, you know, your must-haves are not being met.
Mm-hmm.
So hopefully that they are keeping it internal and quiet, not talking to anybody, because they're hoping to work it out and have everybody get rehired back, or their resignation is rejected and, you know, conditions improved, whatever they may be. That's my hope. But Jill, we are going to take a quick break, and when we return, we are going to be talking about some of the most exciting indie games to come to Switch this fall season, as well as Marvel vs. Capcom Fighting Collection. We will be right back. In the time since my last timely episode, we've had 2 highly anticipated indie titles launch on Switch, and I've checked both of them out. The Plucky Squire has been a game that I have been extremely excited about ever since I learned the concept of it, and Wild Bastards is a follow-up to a game I didn't really play, but I've always thought it looked cool. And then on top of that, I finally checked out Pizza Tower. So, Jill, we're going to run down these, and both of us have played these games. Let's start with Plucky Squire. I feel like that's the biggest name out of this group. For people who are not aware, I have talked about this on the show several times, but the game is co-directed by James Turner, who is the former art director of Game Freak. So I actually, the first time I went to Japan, I actually spent a day with him. Very, very nice guy, very well spoken, thoughtful guy. He did the designs, I think, from like Gen 5 to Gen 8 for Pokemon, if I'm not mistaken, or somewhere in there. And he was also one of the. He was very excited because he's a British fellow, and he was very excited that the UK was the inspiration for Pokemon Sword and Shield, and he was a lot of the designs for that. He is the co-director of the Plucky Squire, and the game is essentially a storybook. And when you're in the storybook, it's like top-down Zelda-style gameplay. And then when you're out of the storybook, it's like 3D action kind of gameplay with a good amount of stealth. I was surprised by how much stealth there is in this game. Yeah. You've rolled credits. I have not, but there's give me your impressions, because I have some things that I absolutely love and some things I don't love entirely.
So Shea, I have a review up on the Indie Informer right now. And I was terrified of putting it up because, like you, I loved the Plucky Squire from the first moment I saw it. It's got that beautiful like pop art children's book story visuals, and it goes from being absolutely beautiful 2D hand-drawn art to 3D rendered beautifully. Unfortunately, when I played through the whole game, the biggest problem for me is execution. I could not go a single segment of this game without some sort of technical glitch, some sort of technical hiccup. It was so bizarre, and some of them were just like, okay, it's just a little wiggly or a little stuttery or whatever, but some of them were like, what
did you play on?
PC.
Okay, I'm playing on PS5.
I've heard some people have had troubles on PS5 as well, so keep an eye out. Okay. I didn't really have problems until about chapter 6 and onward.
Okay.
But I started getting like some tiny things that I'm like, okay, I'll gloss over that, but like some things that were real, like I had to stop playing the game and restart it. And there was one bug in particular where I could not like shoot the gun that I was given. Like nothing, no buttons would work to prompt anything to happen on the screen. So the only reason that didn't become a game ending bug is because the Plucky Squire has really good accessibility options, and you can skip through minigames if you want. You can just go to the menu and say, skip this minigame. So I actually had to literally skip a portion of the game in order to finish it. So it was just so frustrating because you had these moments of like, oh, this is very charming. All of the creativeness of the game. You get different genre changes. Like every chapter of the game is, oh, all of a sudden you're in a fighting game. All of a sudden you're in a Connect 3 game. And those are really fun and cool. And the visuals continue to be just completely stunning throughout. At one point you are, like you said, you jump out of your storybook 2D world into the 3D world, usually to grab some sort of item that you need to continue in your world. And you go into things like there's a dinosaur diorama, and it's like, this is so fantastic. I love this feeling. But at the same time, by the time I was doing all of that, I was aware that any second I could just stop being able to play this game, and that's always
Mm,
a horrific feeling when you're playing a game like this, especially when you're playing a puzzle game, because there are a lot of really heavy puzzle elements to the Plucky Squire, where you are trying to find a word to put in a sentence that makes changes in the world around you. Um, and if you're constantly thinking like, am I missing something, or is the game like a bug and I'm just going to be running around like headless chicken? There there's a real tension there that should not exist for puzzle games. It's an
yeah.
absolute killer for any of the good mood that you had. So this game did not end up being great for me. On top of that, it's hard for me to get a sense of what the game should have been, because of all of those. But on top of that, I get a real sense of shallowness, which I was really unfortunate feeling about. Like, none of the characters I don't feel too much for them. The only character I actually really connect with is the evil character, Humgrump. He is given a great background, and I'm like, I understand where you're coming from. Like, I feel for you. Um,
I like the wizard, the beard guy.
yeah, Moonbeard.
I mean, he's not
Fantastic.
like he doesn't any depth or anything, but
There's no
like
depth to him. Yeah,
he's a fun little like
right.
character.
But that is such a great phrase I'm gonna use. All of this game is just a fun little game, in a way
Mhm.
that's like, this could have been a game of the year if you had just made it a little deeper, maybe cut out some of the, and now we're flying off to do this cool thing, and now it's a 2D platformer, and now it's like, maybe cut some of that down so that you can go a little bit deeper, because you try. We end up in, Jot, the Plucky Squire, our hero, has two friends, and we do end up going into their hometowns and seeing kind of where they live and all of that. We could have gone into their backstories a little bit, because they are trying. They kind of half-ass a story for both of them, and sort of hint at like, oh, she was made fun of as a kid, and he like didn't accept the culture of his people. Like, those are things you could have dug into in a fun and light way to make us care a little bit more, instead of just mentioning it and then walking on. So like, there's not a lot of depth here, um, to make this game really anything more than just like a fun tech, um, a display of fun visuals and
Fun
ideas.
ideas, yeah.
Yes.
I like those. My favorite mechanics that they have are like, hey, here's like you're in this area and there's something blocking your path, and there's like a phrase on the ground, and you can be like, okay, like the books were stacked, and it's like you could slash the word stacked and remove it from the sentence, and then go find somewhere else that says like the books were scattered, and then that will like change the entire scene, and it'll make it so that you can get through like the books because they're no longer stacked in front of the door, they're scattered, so that makes it so that you can get past it. That type of stuff is really inventive and really
Mhm.
cool and really novel in a way that I've not seen in a game before. But it's the gameplay, I think, I mean, I have not encountered the amount of bugs that you have, but when the gameplay works, it's fantastic a lot of the times. The stuff that I'm not in love with are the characters are so verbose, and I
Yeah.
honestly
Mhm.
don't care a lot of the time. Like, some of it's fine, but like it's like, so I know it's a storybook, but like it's a children's book, so it's not like there's that we don't need a novel.
Right.
Like,
And they have the tendency, unfortunately, of like, anytime you need to take a step forward and you've accomplished your step forward, it's like, oh, you need to take a step forward. Oh, you're stepping forward. Oh, you've done the step forward. That's great. Stepping forward was great. Then you get like a whole monologue on how stepping forward. It's like, and then you have to take another step, and you're almost like, I don't want to do it because I know I'm going to get so much.
it
Um,
disrupts the flow.
yeah.
And it's unfortunate because when it is like flowing and you have that forward momentum, it does feel really good. I almost wish that there was like a story mode and like an action mode where you could just be like, allow
Shea,
us to just play these levels without like the long dialogue.
I don't know if you remember from the beginning of the game. There is.
There is?
And you're playing the action mode. There is
Well, I know
literally a
there's a story mode for like difficulty, right?
yeah, but,
So
like, there's a story mode for difficulty to go less difficult than what you are playing now, and I cannot imagine what that means.
I mean, I think more games should have that, but this game is not one that like begs for it, you know? Like
This is
it's
a
not
game
a
that's
difficult
already a
game.
story mode,
Yeah.
essentially.
Yeah, and it's I mean, I don't know if maybe it opens up later, but is it ever not linear?
That's another thing that's harsh about this because it's almost like they introduce a a new puzzle and a new way to solve that puzzle. And you solve that puzzle and you're like, as a gamer, you're sort of like, wow, this is going to really be cool when it ramps up and it gets more complicated and intricate and you can start using everything together. But it doesn't. You go to
Hmm.
the next page, they introduce a new puzzle and a new way to solve that puzzle. You do that and on to the next page. So nothing ever gets that, the word puzzles that you're talking about never get more complicated than maybe walk over to the page before, possibly. But there are just so many ways they could have taken this. This would have been, wow, that is so intriguing. That just doesn't, they just don't. That is just what is right in front of you a lot of the time. Um, I will say, though, in chapter, I want to say 9, and there are only 10 chapters of this game, there is a sort of reversal that goes on. I don't want to spoil it. That had me absolutely back in the game. At that point, I was like, okay, I'm gonna get through this, and I'm sad that I don't like it as much as I did. And then this particular thing hit, and I'm like, oh, cool. I'm so in. This is great. The story got stronger, like the visuals hit me all over again, and I was struck by the creativity all over again. Um, and that just went on just a little too long to keep that good taste at the end of the day, especially since at the final boss, I actually got yeeted out of the battlefield
What?
to such a degree that, like, I could not hit the bad guy, but the bad guy could hit me. So I was just off screen somewhere waiting to get hit to death so I could restart the fight again. And I'm like, okay, yep, nope, that put that bad taste back in my mouth.
Yeah, that's
So,
not great. So I'm looking at your review here on the Indie Informer, and you recommend it to patient players,
yep,
those who can appreciate rays of sunshine through the clouds. I like
yep,
that. Action adventure enthusiasts. Okay,
yep,
that's good. Fans of art. Yeah, it is a very pretty
It's
game.
very beautiful.
Anyone willing to wait and hope for post-launch patches. You
That's
gave it a 6.5 out
I
of
did.
10.
I did. And in the first time in my entire career, Shay, I am at the bottom of the Metacritic. Like,
Really?
yeah. I was really expecting to not be in the mid like, to not be at the bottom, and then it started hitting with, like, 100, 10 out of 10, 9 out of 10. I'm like, "Uh, did we play the same game?" Like,
Maybe they
I
played the
am
console version. Maybe that's less buggy. I don't know.
Go play it on Switch, it's perfect.
But if you'd like to check out Jill's full review of the Plucky Squire, go to the Indie Informer and search the Plucky Squire, and it'll come right up.
It'll be there.
The second game I wanted to talk about is not one either of us has finished, but we've each played it. We've each gotten our hands on it, and that is Wild Bastards. So
Mhm.
this is the follow-up to Void Bastards, which came out a few years ago. And they really stepped into like kind of like the strategy angle this
Yes.
time around. Basically, it is a first-person shooter, and you are going around recruiting a gang, and you have to go around to like these different planets, and when you land you have like a set number of moves that you can make on like almost like a Mario 3-esque like overworld map. And then when you get to these levels, they're like shootout levels where you have to go around and fight these enemies and take them all out or do whatever you need to do in the level. And you're collecting power-ups, you're collecting loot, you're trying to survive, and like if your characters get hurt, they're injured for like a set number of time. If all your characters die, then it's pretty much just game over, and you have to like you get kicked out of the map and you have to start the map all over again. Um, it's really fun. However, the mechanics aren't the best feeling. Like I feel like the shooting mechanics, something feels stiff but not precise enough, if that makes sense. I'm trying to put my finger on how I feel about the shooting mechanics. It just feels like a game that doesn't it feels like a shooting game made by a company that doesn't make shooting games, which is
Mm.
weird because it's the same developers that did Void Bastards who made a shooting game. How did this game strike you? I mean, you played it at PAX, right? Or
I
you played
played
a
it at
preview?
PAX, and I've played multiple kind of previews of it.
Okay.
I am sort of reversed from this in the Plucky Squire. It's like a lot of people, the opinions came out and they were sort of mixed, but I so far from what I've played, I'm really high on this game because it hits me very particularly. And I love that kind of strategy game. I love the sort of when I was first playing it, I actually played it at GDC with one of the developers.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and they talked to me about how this game, unlike Void Bastards, does a lot more sneaking through and strategizing even within the shooting part of the game. So I was like, I was just being cowardly, but if you want to say that was being strategic, fine. But I think maybe there is a touch of that where people are going in and just like guns blazing, and I'm going to do all this. Where I really love the idea of like the special abilities and being able to switch through your characters, because a lot of the time what I would be doing is throwing in my girl Spider Rosa because she's
She's awesome.
She's amazing. She's got 8 limbs because she's a spider. So she's got all these guns and she doesn't have to reload that
Yeah,
often.
it's just to reload. She reloads a lot quicker than everybody because she can use like her other limbs to like reload. It's pretty
Mhm.
like they all have different abilities. And it's really cool like how they
Yeah.
play off the character designs.
So I use her to like thin out the crowd, and then once I get like one enemy left on the map, and the map usually tells you how many enemies you are trying to get through. Um I switch over to Casino, who's a kind of robot person.
Is that the
Who's
shotgunner?
Yes, and
Okay,
his
I like
special
him.
ability is like it's like roulette or something
Mm-hmm.
that will kill one enemy on the map. And if you've only got one enemy left on the map,
It's a good ability.
you've won the game. So like that was sort of how I switched between them. No matter who else I unlocked, I'm kind of like, no, this is sort of my duo right now. Um, so yeah, I'm really enjoying myself in this game, and plus it's so beautiful to look at as well. It's a very different sort of hand drawn aesthetic than a Plucky Squire, but
Mm-hmm.
not any less beautiful. I really enjoy the idea of the overworld map where you have restrictions on where you can go. You have a ticking clock because you are being pursued at all times by uh, this big sort of gang leader opposite of you who is going to beam down and just completely destroy your people at the end of a certain round. So, like, you want to pick up all of this loot and all of this extra gear, but trying to weigh out whether or not you have the time to do that. I find that like a really fun aspect of gaming.
Mm-hmm.
And I recognize that that's a sort of bizarre niche that it's sort of made just for me, which is it. I kind of prefer so far, because again, I have not finished the game. I sort of prefer not only the setting, because I'm a lot more interested in the kind of like space cowboy vibe,
Yeah.
but I am interested in all of the tacticalness of this game.
Yeah, it's kind of like I mean, you were talking about the art style. It's kind of like cell shaded, but also very rudimentary in like the
Mhm.
shapes and
Yeah.
like there's not like high resolution textures. They're usually pretty much a solid color, but it adds a really cool aesthetic because of that,
Yeah.
right? And there's some gradients and everything thrown in there, but I don't know. I'm having a good time with it. I want to play more of it. I kind of had to jump off of it to play something else that came in that I'll be talking about in coming weeks on All Things Gamers.
Bum, bum, bum.
What could it be? Uh, but Wild Bastards and the Plucky Squire are both available now across most platforms. And then I wanted to talk very briefly about a game that I've been playing. I don't know if you've checked this game out yet, Jill, but Pizza Tower.
Like, I've jumped into it for like a second and I am
Yeah.
ashamed. It is something I really should be getting into because I know how good it is. I
Yeah.
just don't have that time.
It came out on Steam last year, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
And then it was announced earlier this summer as coming to Switch. And I have been playing the Steam version finally. I've had it in my Steam library for so long. I finally fired it up and was playing. So I played through the first world and a little bit extra, a little bit beyond that. And it is just, it's a 2D platformer with like kind of like late 80s cartoon aesthetic where it's like the characters all kind of like are squiggly. It's like imperfect. It's almost like, what was that show? The Critic? Is that what the
I'll
show
go with it.
was? Or maybe I'm thinking of like home movies where it's like all the characters are a little bit squiggly, like they're not like straight lines that like make up their characters.
Mm-hmm.
It almost has that aesthetic, a very like rough visual style, but it's still like beautiful in its own way. And you're playing like a guy who loves pizza, like a chef, I think, and he's like running through the stages frantically trying to collect pizza toppings, and there's no real story to it, but like it's fun. Like you're just running through.
Yeah.
There's the music is fantastic, and you're basically just sprinting through these levels, and you're using attacks on these enemies. You're picking up power-ups like that. One of the first power-ups you get is like you can transform into like a knight in like armor, and you can't sprint in this suit of armor. But instead, like what you do is like when you land on a hill, you like pick up momentum and you like hold out your sword and you're able to like stab through obstacles. So you have to like manage your momentum in that way. Whereas other things like you need to pick up momentum in order to blast through like certain obstacles, like these like the metal boxes that are blocking your way. And then like once you get to the end, it just says pizza time, and you have to run backwards through the level and sometimes through different paths and everything. It reminds me a lot of an upcoming game, Anton Blast.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
As in they're both very much inspired by Wario Land. And I'm having a really good time with Pizza Tower. I almost said Pizza Time, Pizza Tower. And it like the boss battle, the one that I've played, is really fun. It's where the limitations of the game really kind of start showing up, and I don't know if that's going to be the case for the rest of the boss battles, but you don't feel quite as precise as you would like in the boss
Mm-hmm.
battles. But in the main levels where you're just like sprinting full steam ahead, like through enemies and like around the levels, it's the right level of chaos. And I'm excited to see like how they evolve the formula, what additional power-ups they give you. I am all on board with this. I've been itching to play Anton Blast, and thankfully that game's coming out in December.
November 11th,
November.
I want to
November.
say.
Oh, look at you! It's like indies. But yeah, I'm extremely excited for Anton Blast. But Pizza Tower is in that similar vein, and you should absolutely play more of it, Jill.
Yeah, I everyone that I talk to who's ever played this for any length of time is like, this is a fantastic game. It is a game that knows what it is and it leans into it without any reservations. It is a silly, wild gameplay experience, and I have so many games that I'm like, I really am gonna get to it, I promise.
Yeah,
But
you and me both. But yeah, that's available now on, I think it's just Steam and Switch. I don't think it's on like PlayStation or Xbox quite yet.
who knows?
There's no way of knowing.
Bum, bum, bum.
Let's see. We'll figure that out actually. Yep, it's just Steam and Switch for now. But yeah, I think it's only $20 too. Yeah, it is. So play Pizza Tower.
Play Pizza Tower.
We're going to close out with a non-indie game, Jill. I'm sorry for offending you here, but
It's okay.
it is a retro game, a retro collection of games. That is Marvel vs. Capcom Fighting Collection Arcade Classics. Just came out, long awaited. This was last week. It hit Switch, and here's the list of games that it includes. So it's a lot of like Capcom developed Marvel games, most of which are crossovers, but some of them aren't. So you get X-Men Children of the Atom, Marvel Superheroes, X-Men versus Street Fighter, Marvel Superheroes versus Street Fighter, Marvel vs. Capcom Clash of Superheroes, Marvel vs. Capcom 2 New Age of Heroes, and then the black sheep of the collection, The Punisher, which is a side-scrolling beat 'em up. It's not a fighting game.
Ooh.
But I've heard very good things about that. So I'm happy that these games are all on modern consoles now, because, you know, the last time Marvel vs. Capcom 2 in particular, which I would imagine is the one most people are very excited for in this collection, the last time that was released, I believe, was Xbox 360 as part of like Xbox Live Arcade. And then it was promptly delisted and almost impossible to find. But, you know, it has been released on Arcade 1-Up. I have that arcade cabinet. But I spent some time with this collection, both on my flight back from San Diego, which I was out for a preview trip last week, doing some freelance stuff for GameSpot, actually. I've played it on the flight home, and then I played it again a little bit last night. And I did basically, like, you know, fired up and played several fights of each game. And it kind of hit me that I've been playing a lot of Street Fighter this year, and you know, a decent amount of Tekken 8. And I think that I would prefer that style of fighter. Like, I loved the Marvel vs. Capcom and, you know, Marvel Superheroes games back in the day. Like, it blew my freaking mind when I was at a camping trip with my parents, and they had like they called it a beach house. It was just like a little shack on the side of the lake that was at the campground. And there were like 5 arcade cabinets in there and like a couple pinball machines. And I would obviously be begging my parents to like let me go in there and play games like every single day. And I remember the first time I went in there and they had X-Men versus Street Fighter. And I loved the X-Men cartoon. I read a lot of X-Men comics growing up. And I love Street Fighter too. And I was like, this blows my mind. Like, how could a thing like this exist? And I played the crap out of it. And then I owned Marvel vs. Capcom 2 on Dreamcast. So I loved these games growing up, but I think it's a little too chaotic for my tastes now. But I will say, I still have a really great time with this collection. And also, the thing that I love is that it gives you so many options. As my voice cracks, so many options to customize the experience. So if you want to have it, so these are the arcade ports, right? It's not the home console versions. So if you want to have all the secret characters unlocked, you can do that. If you just want, like in Marvel vs. Capcom 2, because there's so many characters, if you just want block A of the secret characters unlocked, you can do that. If you want block B unlocked, you want block A and B. If you want all 3 of the blocks unlocked, you can do that. You can adjust the difficulty settings, which I will tell you, because these are arcade games, the difficulty is unforgiving, because these versions were designed to make you pump in some quarters.
They want those quarters.
And goodness gracious, would they get them from me? But I would even set the difficulty very low, like 1 or 0 stars. It's like a star rating of how difficult, which is fun because that is how the old Street Fighter games used to do it. And even on the lowest difficulty settings, I would be using some continues to keep going. But yeah, like I love that there's different filters. There's training modes for each one. So like, you'll actually learn the hitboxes. Like, a lot of players are like discovering on social media, and they're sharing. They're like, oh my God, I didn't know this little projectile that he threw up. I thought it was just like for show as he launched into his super attack. No, that actually has a hitbox as well. And like, people are learning stuff from the training modes. And, you know, there's also online play, which is funny because the Steam reviews of this game have been completely taken over by people who, they fire up the game for the first time and they go online for their first match, and their first match is against freaking Justin Wong, former he's current Evo legend. One of the greatest fighting game players of all time. It just so happens he keeps getting matched up against these players going into their first match.
I love it.
So you go into the Steam reviews, and everybody, his name in the game is the Wazzler, and everybody's like, beware the Wazzler. And then he like posted on his Twitter account like that he bought the Switch version. Everybody's like, no. The Wazzler comes to Switch. And so Justin Wong, shout out Justin Wong, awesome dude from all my interactions with him. But yeah, I'm enjoying this. It's not quite the joyous occasion that I was hoping it would be, like unadulterated joy, just because I feel like going back to these is showing me that like, oh, maybe these aren't like as great or like in my wheelhouse as I remember them being back when I played them in, middle and high school or even elementary school for some of the earlier ones. But it is a fascinating snapshot of a very specific era in both Marvel and Capcom's history, where it's like, Marvel was in a very rough patch in the late 90s, mid to late 90s. They were selling off their licenses. Like, that's why it took so long for us to get the X-Men in the MCU, because they sold off the X-Men license to Fox, and they sold off the Spider-Man license to Sony. And, Fantastic Four also went to Fox. And, they're finally gathering all these franchises back together. But it's interesting that you look at the rosters of these different eras, and it's like, oh, that's the character they were pushing in this era. Whereas like now you're like, oh yeah, obviously it would be like Iron Man, Captain America, Thor, Black Panther. And it's like you look at some of the rosters and it's like, Iron Man's not in this game. War Machine is in it, but Iron Man's not. Or like, you can do like an Iron Man variant of War Machine if you want to. And it's like, Iron Man's in a lot of them, but like imagine them putting out a Marvel game where it's like a full-fledged like crossover game and Iron Man's not in it. It's just
right.
It's fascinating to see like the characters that they were highlighting in these various eras. But you know what? I do also love that like I don't want to learn all of like the combinations and like special moves of all these characters. I just want to jump in and see Ryu and Wolverine beat the crap out of like all these other characters from Marvel and Capcom. I don't want to learn like all the different special moves and super moves and everything. So you can actually map the various special and super moves to the like different buttons. So what I did was I was like, okay, well, if I want to do like a crossover attack in the tag team games, I'm just going to click the left stick and my partner will jump in, do an attack, and then swap out. So I don't have to like do the different inputs to do that. I can just click the left stick down, which I'm using the D-pad in anyway. So I have to go out of my way to click it. So I really like the customization and, I know you call them accessibility options, but really they're just about making them more approachable,
Yeah.
So as for a collection of these games, you can't do much better outside of like, they could maybe do a little bit more of like the historical aspect. I didn't see a ton of stuff. Like there's like a jukebox and stuff, but like I would like more of like the like almost like what Digital Eclipse does with their collections, where it's like an amazing like tribute to like that era. That would have been cool if they could have had some sort of like documentary style. But I mean, that's just me talking because Digital Eclipse has raised the bar so high for these collections. But overall, I think this is a fantastic collection of the Marvel vs. Capcom, not just those two games, but like the lineage leading up to that, and like all these games that Capcom has released. And I'm hoping that they keep it up with the various other. I mean, they've already shown that they're doing another Capcom fighting collection with I'm going to shout out Power Stone. I love Power Stone, so I'm glad that that's included in the second fighting collection that they've announced for next year. I say keep it rolling, Capcom. Yeah, geez, I almost said Marvel. Keep it rolling, Capcom, on these collections. Like, take advantage of your history, your legacy. Nintendo does it. Why shouldn't you? You have a very rich history as well. But as with all the other games here, it is available now on multiple platforms, including the Nintendo Switch. But Jill, we're going to take one final break, and when we get back, we're going to shine the spotlight on you, and you're going to let us know all the new indies that we should have on our radars that you discovered and played at PAX West. We will be right back. We are back, and before we get out of here, Jill, you were recently at PAX West, and as listeners to this podcast know, you are my go-to voice when it comes to indie games, and wouldn't you know it, PAX is always an indie haven. So in lieu of an eShop gem this week, I wanted to see if you had any indies you wanted to shout out that you either played or discovered at PAX West a couple of weeks ago. So after we do that, though, I am going to talk a little bit about the response that we got to last week's episode about the Dreamcast. But let's start with the PAX West indies that you want to highlight that are coming to Switch? By my count, you have 4 that you want to talk about.
I do. And the such a weird thing about this particular show is every time I go on, I have to be very careful that what I am highlighting is coming to the Switch. Because there are a lot of games that I checked out that I'm like, 99.9% sure will come to the Switch, but it's not confirmed yet. But these ones are confirmed. They are coming, and I know that they will be on the Switch. And I think all of them are 2025. So keep
Okay.
an eye
Well,
out
that
for
makes
next
sense.
year. Yeah. Yeah, I had a fantastic time at PAX, running around, checking out all the indie games. The first one that I want to shout out, though, is a game that I checked out last year at PAX as well. And this has been a game that's been on my horizon forever, and it just does not have the love that it deserves to have. And people should have this on their like most anticipated indies list. And that it's not there yet is beyond me, but we're gonna do it here, everybody. You're gonna do it with me. We're gonna put this on everybody's radar. It's called Everdeep Aurora. It's a hard game to say 5 times fast.
The Rural Juror.
Rural Drawer. Everdeep Aurora. Um, it is a 16-bit Game Boy inspired game that is essentially following like a kitten. You play as a small child anthropomorphized cat who took a nap and then woke up to an apocalypse, like you
Hmm.
do. Um, so the first moment you're in this game, you look up in the sky and there are like asteroids hitting the moon and everything's going wild. And you have no idea what's happened. When you went to sleep, your mother was there and now she's gone. And you don't have any idea where to go from here. So you and the main character are very much in the same boat. You wander around and you find a character who might be the best named character ever. It's a frog named Ribbert.
Okay.
Yeah. Who's like, hey, you should head underground because that's where everybody has gone because of the apocalypse.
Hmm.
So you get this drill, and that's where the game kind of opens up because the game, it's not very like wide. It's only like takes you like a minute to get from one side to the other, but it is a super deep, both literally and figuratively, game where you are drilling downwards and there are different levels sort of the game, but also society, which is now formed in
Hmm.
the wake of an apocalypse, and the mystery unfolding as to where your mother has gone and why you've been left behind. The drill is so much fun because you drill down and it takes energy away from the drill. So as you are going, you have to kind of keep in mind the fuel that you have, and as you're digging, you'll find each like tile of dirt might have something in it, and so maybe you'll pick up resources which help you buy fuel later on. But you will it won't take you very long before you actually run into characters and the story starts unfolding, and the writing is so good and it's funny and it's bizarre and it's like got a message to it, but it's also just what the heck is going on. I think there are like the first things you kind of run into is like, okay, you're an old woman who wants a piece of fruit, and she can give you something that she's holding on to until she can get that. So then you're like, okay, and you go and you discover like an underground orchard. And so, okay, now I know how to get the fruit, to get to the woman, to get the thing. And then that thing ends up being something necessary for another thing, and then another thing. And it just keeps kind of unfolding in this way. And the way that they play around with art and the visuals and the like, it's a monochromatic palette, but
Hmm.
it changes from like green to orange, just bright, vibrant purple, and it's all so Game Boy.
It
All
looks like
of
a Game Boy Color game. Yeah.
all of the sounds are so nostalgic and you're feeling it as you go through, and I'm like, I just want to get through, because so far I've played a lot of previews of this game, so I've only played to about like level 1 of the stratosphere. So I'm like, I want to get to level 2. I want to know what's happening in this world. I want to see what the mystery is. Um, and yeah, it's been on my anticipated list for over a year at this point, and I cannot wait for 2025 to see more of it.
Yeah, it has a 16-bit aesthetic and it looks really cool. I've not known about this game. I'm just like kind of checking it out now for the first time, and it's, yep, effectively on my radar, Jill.
Yeah,
You
we
did
did
it.
it.
And it's coming to PC and Switch.
Mhm.
So Switch is one of the only platforms they've announced this game for.
There you
So
go.
I will definitely check that out. I don't even know if it's on. Is it on the eShop yet?
I don't think so.
Ever Deep Aurora
I
Switch.
feel like
It
every
is
time I
not.
go to the eShop,
It's on Steam.
okay, go wish list it if you can. But yeah,
I'll
it's
add it to
definitely
my wish
coming
list.
to the Switch. So check that out.
Yeah. So that looks really cool. Next one is Love Eternal.
Love Eternal.
I don't know
And
anything about these games.
both of these games, Everdeep Aurora and Love Eternal, are being published by Isbeard.
Yeah.
Isbeard? It's look up how it's spelled because it's spelled with Y's all over the place.
YSBRYD.
As Isbeard. I'll say I think that last one was the
We'll say
closest.
Isbeard. Isbrid.
Isbrid. Um, and this is a publisher, an indie publisher that is flown under the radar for way too long. They have a fantastic portfolio, and their games that are coming out soon are utterly fantastic. And Love Eternal is one of these. This is the first time that I've played it at PAX. It was revealed very recently. It is a kind of precision platformer psychological horror game. um, and it's so intriguing. It dives into kind of later childhood. The character is 14 years old, and sort of what it's like to be cognizant of reality and your humanity, but also not having authority over your life. And all of that sort of bleeds through not only through the narrative, but also the mechanics of the game, which from the get-go is an amazing, fantastic premise of a game.
Hmm.
The look of it is sort of also unsettling. It is a kind of minimalistic pixel art game.
I love the look of it. I'm watching
Yeah.
the trailer right now.
Oh, it's and it gets real creepy. So you start off the game as 14-year-old girl. She's in her room. She's called down to dinner. There's some family tensions as there tend to be at that age. And then you blink and your house is a bombed out shell and no one is around. You're like,
Huh.
what the heck has just happened? So you wander out. Everything looks horrific and like a war just passed by. And suddenly you find yourself having to go through levels of precision platformers. And the big kind of mechanic here is that you can control gravity, and you have to do so in order to get through all of these levels that are strewn with spikes and lasers and things that are trying to kill you. So you can do this once and then you have to touch
Ooh.
down again. But then at some points you start to get these like little red stones, which when you hit gives you the ability to upside down again. So there's momentum involved in all of this. So you have to start getting a handle on what gravity feels like and what the momentum is. Like there's at one point that you're going to die over and over and over again,
Yeah,
and
this
that's
looks
just going
very
to happen.
challenging.
The
Oh
cool
man.
thing about it is that it's so immediate. When you die, you boom, you're back. You boom, you're
So a
back.
little bit of Super Meat Boy.
Yeah, you never get like the time to be discouraged. You're just like, yep, know what I'm gonna do. I know what happened. I'm doing it. I'm gonna fix it. So like, no matter how many times you die, it doesn't feel frustrating because you're like, I'm always building up. I'm getting there. Like that progress is happening.
I would bet it probably gets pretty frustrating. Looking at some of these levels they were showing off in the trailer, I would bet
Oh,
that
it's
gets
fun.
fairly frustrating, even though it has that like instant gratification. I mean, Super Meat Boy gets frustrating sometimes.
It's possible. It's one of those games. that when you are sitting there playing with a developer sitting next to you, you're sort of like, I would really like to be amazing at this game, but
Oh
I'm
yeah.
dying 100 times in front of this person who's like, you know, not judging for being judgmental, but judging to see like what level of difficulty is happening, because this is the first time this person is watching real unconnected people play the game.
Yeah.
So I want to say I did okay. You know, I was pretty proud of myself. It's definitely a game where you walk into a level and you're like, okay, give me a second to plan out what I think the route is going to be. There was one where I remember very distinctly I had to jump into a pit with spikes all around it. It was a deep pit, and it had a red stone at the bottom. And the idea was you had to jump into the pit perfectly without touching any of the spikes, hit the red gem, and uh, upside down yourself with change gravity, reverse
Upside down yourself.
upside down yourself, reverse gravity just in time for the momentum to not push you into the spikes at the bottom, so that gravity would pull you to the level on the other side. And it was just like, oh, I know what I have to do, but man, do I have to do it with ultimate precision. And then when you are getting so like into the flow of the game, suddenly you hit the ground at the end of one of the levels and boom, you're just back into your family dinner like nothing happened. You're like, what? What's happening? And then blink again, your dad's on the table in a spider body. You're like, what? I don't need
I saw the
this.
spider body in the
Spider
trailer, and
body. And I was
not a
just like,
fan.
okay, okay,
Not a
I get
fan
it.
personally.
I am
Uh,
so in for this game.
I am too. Look, I added it to my Steam wish list as well. That is coming out next year on pretty much all platforms. So it's PC, Xbox, PlayStation, and Switch. Jill, we got two more, one of which is an early access game
It
right
is.
now. Came out in early access in March of this year. It's Ender Magnolia.
Yes, this is the follow-up to Ender Lilies.
That was
And
the
it's
one
so
Quietest of the Night, right?
yes. It's so funny because every time I think of this game, I think of Dantak.
Yes.
Because this was his game and he loves this game, and I would love to see what he thinks of Ender Magnolia. But I jumped into this game and it was funny because you look at the difficulty of like Love Eternal, and I had been playing these like really difficult sort of games. So I was actually feeling kind of like a sigh of relief for Ender Magnolia, even though it is a kind of challenging Souls-like esque game. But like I was in it, I knew exactly what I was going for. I already knew the vibe of this game. I had a fun time. In this particular game, you pick up like homunculuses
Mm-hmm.
and they count
Homunculi, I believe, is the
homunculi,
plural.
excuse me, uh, and they act as your abilities. So essentially, when you're hitting one button, you're calling upon one of your homunculuses, to
I'm
like
not lying about this. That is the plural of that word.
put in chat homunculuses, everybody. Um, and maybe one of your homunculi hit like a forward thrust, and one of them will like do a dash or something, and so you're using these to get through the world and get to the next essentially bonfire. And then at the end of the demo I played was a big boss, which I was feeling real good about. I thought I got through the boss fight without any damage taken. I was like, yeah, that's amazing. And then it was phase two.
I was gonna say, I bet there's another phase. The exact same thing happened to me when I was playing the first boss of Pizza Tower. I was like, I
Yeah.
did it! And then it's like, surprise!
Oh, okay. But then at the end of the boss, when it was really the end of the boss battle, that I had beaten this homunculus who then I could collect to be one of my homunculi. So now I had a new power that was like a machine gun kind of power to go forward. So every time you beat like a big boss and you kind of gain their powers, but like it's cool the idea of not only gaining the powers but gaining the entity, so that every time you're at like a bonfire, or I forget what they call it in this particular.
Probably homunculus.
Probably. Um, they're all there with you, so you are kind of building up this relationship as well. So it's a really cool. It feels really good. Feels really smooth. I love the way everything was working, and I almost got through the boss without any damage.
You
We'll
just
go with
needed
that.
more homunculi.
Yep,
The
that's
thing
true.
is like you have to fight the homunculus so they become one of your homunculi, and then
Yep.
when you get the homunculus on your team and you have
Yeah.
your team of homunculi, you can use the homunculus of your choosing from your stable of homunculi to beat
Yeah.
the boss. That's what you
And
need.
then combine them all to be homunculosises.
All right, Jill, what else you got?
Before we jump out, I do want to say Ender Magnolia is coming January 22nd.
Oh, it is. Okay, I didn't know it
Yes.
had an actual date.
So it's got an actual date.
Okay, awesome. Yeah, and it's currently on Steam Early Access as of March of this year, but
Yes.
coming to all platforms in January. So I'm honestly very excited for this, and I would like. I never checked out Ender Lilies. I don't know if I have it on any of my systems. Like
I'm
it's one of
sure
those
you do
things. I'm sure
somewhere.
I do. It's probably on Game Pass or something. I
Mhm.
don't know.
Go
Or
check it
maybe I
out.
just got it on sale because I just do that sometimes where I just buy games on sale for a platform and then I'm like, I'll play it one day and then I
Right. Or
don't.
like I come on the show and suddenly you have like 20 different indie games.
Jill, you have no idea what you've done to me.
See, this is why
I'm
these are all
ruined.
2025. You can't buy them yet. It's
I'm
okay.
ruined because of you. That's why I have paid tiers on the Patreon now. That and unemployment. Okay, so Ender Magnolia, Bloom in the Mist, coming out January for most platforms. You have one more though,
I
Jill,
do
that you
have
want
one
to talk
more.
about. That is the Stone of
The
Madness.
Stone of Madness. It is such a
It's a good name.
it's another one of these games that was just built for me. It is so like it is a hand-drawn kind of isometric game, which that's my aesthetic. It is a tactical stealth game, kind of immersive sim.
Mm-hmm.
So that's all up my alley as well. And then you are in 18th century Spain in a
Hmm.
monastery with a major mystery going on, a conspiracy, if you will. So all those elements combined just make it such a fun game. And I got to jump into this at the Mix, which is an event that
Oh,
happens
nice. I love the
usually.
mix.
Yeah. Um, so what you are doing, you start the game out and you're this guy who sees a woman being dragged from one side of the courtyard to the other, screaming and kicking, terrified, something's killing her, something's coming at night to get her. Um, and then we go into the backstory of what's happened here. You are playing as a person who was originally a brother of the monastery, um, and the monastery is known for its charitable hospitality and taking care of the insane, essentially. So they are known for being that kind of caretaker. So he went from being a part of the Brotherhood to being thrown into essentially jail. Uh,
Okay.
and according to him, because he discovered the corruption that goes to the center of this monastery and was going to expose it. So now we have been thrown uh into the insane asylum with you suppose other people who are saying wild things so that no one will believe the truth that we have discovered. And do they tell us what that truth is? No. Of course not. I have to figure it out. So then you cut back to, okay, I've just seen this woman being carted across the courtyard. Do I believe that this woman is actually experiencing bad things and that this is a bad person who is like sending her off to her death? Or do you believe that this is a woman who is having delusions and there is someone taking care of her and trying to get her better? Like, you have to kind of wrestle with this from the beginning. And
Mm.
they kick it off and you're kind of like, you learn the basic stealth mechanics of like, hide behind this, and there's visual cones that you have to kind of figure out how to get around. You have special powers that once you get deeper into the monastery and you're sort of following after this woman, ghosts appear because, of course, all monasteries are haunted. And because you previously had this religious connection, you can use a sermon to kind of scare away the ghosts. And I'm like, this is perfect. I love it. And like everything in your pathway is interactable in some way, so you are like, there are torches on the walls and I can like snuff them out so I can be a lot more sneaky, or if I have a torch on, I can light the torch, but if a window's open, the torch goes out, so I have to go sneak over and get the window to close. And like it's just a lot of like, oh, if I were really here, this is what it would be like, because there's so much a part of like accepting game logic.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas this game has a lot of like, okay, this is real. This is really what it would be like if I was trying to sneak through. This is not a like, I have superpowers and I'm able to take on guards. I literally, if I get caught, I get caught, and that's a problem. Um, so yeah, when I actually get to the end of the demo that I played, because this demo could have gone on for very long, it sounds like,
It
but
seems like one of those games that you need a little bit of time with in
yes.
order to like really wrap your head around it.
Yes, absolutely. And I felt really bad because like there was a line forming behind me and it's a busy event. So
Yeah.
I'm like, I want to continue playing, but I have to acquiesce to the fact that I'm being kind of rude right now. But I did get to the point where I found the cell where I thought she was being held, and I actually found another person who I knew previously, who, because of like, I think being in jail and being like manual labor for so long, is now super strong. So now he joins my party and I can go off and sneak off and switch between them. And he can like make bridges and like do really like move big rocks and like do all the physical labor. And then if ghosts pop up, I can switch over to my other guy. So I'm like hugely into this game, and I walked away very excited to check it out.
It has absolutely beautiful animation. I was just like jaw slacked as I'm watching some of the animations in the trailer while you were
Yeah.
telling me about it. And it was funny because your descriptions happened to sync up directly with some of the, it just so happened that I hit the trailer at that right time. But yeah, this game, it doesn't seem as up my alley as the other ones we've talked
Mhm,
about, but
mhm.
I bet that if I played enough of it to like have it that moment where I click and like understand what it is, I bet I would get as consumed by it as you seem to be.
Yeah, if you're a little history freak like me, like, I am in on
I
this
used to work at a
game.
museum.
I used to work in a museum.
So but thank you so much for sharing. Do we have a release date for this?
Oh, this is, I think 2025 is the only window we have. The only
Okay.
thing that I did want to shout out is the developer for this game is the Game Kitchen, which people
Oh,
might know as the creators behind the Blasphemous series.
I
So
love
you got,
Blasphemous.
yeah, you've got a lot of those like religious themes kind of coming in here, slightly different, but you know how they do a good narrative. So,
Yeah, I mean, I'm all about checking that out, especially if it's from that same studio. And the animations, now that you mention it, do look like something you would see in Blasphemous, even
yep.
though it's like an isometric view.
Hmm.
But Jill, thank you so much for sharing some of your favorites that you saw at PAX West that are also coming to Switch.
He says thank you, y'all. But you have to understand, he asked me to come on, and I was like, I demand to talk about these PAX West games.
Hey, I said you were at PAX West. Do you want to share some of the
I
games that you checked out?
absolutely did. I'm like, here are all of the games I'm going to talk about.
Jill, before we wrap up, last week we celebrated the 25th anniversary of the Sega Dreamcast, making me feel extremely old. But over on the Patreon page, we had some people chiming in with their own Dreamcast memories. So I just wanted to read a few of them here. Brooke Obscura said, I missed out on the Dreamcast. At the time, I was completely unaware that stock was eventually being liquidated. What a bargain it must have been to those who were lucky enough to experience it. Thankfully, a sizable number of Dreamcast library found new home on the GameCube. It's very similar to how, after the failure of the Wii U, several of those games made it over to Switch. Phantasy Star Online became one of my favorite games. The friends I had at the time played it as well. We all got broadband adapters so we could play online. The soundtrack to the game is amazing as well. Such fond memories. My hope is that sometime soon Sega releases an anniversary edition of the game. It would be such a treat to play it on modern consoles where online functionality is baked in, doesn't require special hardware or additional specialized subscription fees. I love memories like that. Like it's so nice to hear people having like these experiencing the things that we experienced as well, but from a different angle. Meanwhile, Derek Sigmund says, I bought my Dreamcast from Best Buy for $50 after the discontinuation had been announced. I played Shenmue through multiple times. Great game. I remember using the modem to browse Amazon and buy more games, and the VMU was definitely a cool touch. Lots of good memories with the Dreamcast. And then one more from Greg Nagy saying, Brian, I'm in the middle of listening to the episode about the Dreamcast, which brought back a memory I wanted to share. I have always been a computer nerd, so I remember messing with Shockwave and Flash software and websites back in 1999-2000 when a pop-up window asked if I wanted to enter a Dreamcast sweepstakes. I entered the short form and moved on, thinking nothing of it. Probably 2 months later, I received a brown box with a new Dreamcast and 5 games. I was shocked. I believe the 3 that I played were Sonic Adventure, Crazy Taxi, and Choo Choo Rocket. I sold the other 2. I had enough technical know-how to get the system on the internet for free and played some games like Choo Choo Rocket with others online. Later, I remember playing through Shenmue, Jet Set Radio, and Resident Evil Code Veronica. I still have the system and most of the games. That's awesome. I love these memories and people sharing them. Those were all shared on the All Things Nintendo Patreon page. Also, for those who are not $10 patrons and are wondering what is happening on the other side of the fence, over on All Things Gamers this week, I reacted to the PlayStation 5 Pro news, which gave me a great excuse to also trace the history of console revisions dating all the way back to the NES. And I also took listener feedback on their most anticipated games of the fall season and delivered my impressions on Frostpunk 2. So again, you can find All Things Gamers over on the $10 tier of the All Things Nintendo Patreon page. It's a new podcast. It's a sibling podcast to this very show. Happens every single week. It hits your podcast feeds every Wednesday. But Jill, that is it for this episode of All Things Nintendo. Thanks so much for joining me.
Thank you for having me.
And thank you so much, everyone, for listening. Do me a favor, if you haven't already, throw All Things Nintendo a 5-star review and hit that subscribe button. And if you want more ATN content, you can join the Patreon paid tiers. If you want to get any questions or comments in, you can get in touch with me at brian@allthingsnintendo.com. Hit me up on social media at Brian P. Shea, or join the Discord server, which is a perk for joining a paid tier of the Patreon. Also, be sure to find me on YouTube and subscribe to that channel. You can search for All Things Nintendo or visit at Brian P. Shea on YouTube. Might be some cool content going up on that very YouTube channel as you are listening to this episode. Something you might want to check out if you are a Persona fan. But Jill, where can people find you online?
Best place to find me is probably the IndieInformer.com, where you can see all of my coverage, including all my PAX coverage just went up this week. And it goes way deeper and way longer, and it has all of the stuff that I saw that I'm absolutely in love with, so please go check that out. I am also on the Twitters at, if you're looking for just me in particular, it's FINRUIN. If you're looking for the Indie Informer, it's Indie_Informer, because you can't fit the Indie Informer all in one thing. I'm also on Blue Sky, and you can check me out on YouTube. I do stream occasionally on Fridays. I stream every Friday for the most part. But please check out the Indie Council, where I have collected a gaggle of the best and brightest across the indie sphere, and we talk about what's going on in the indie world. And most recently, a big showcase from 6-1 Indie that was absolutely fantastic that no one should miss, so go check that out.
That is our show for this week. Thank you again for listening. Take care. We'll see you next time. Before we wrap up this episode, I just want to give a special shout out to the $10 patrons of the All Things Nintendo podcast: Aaron Smith, Elena R., Alex Stadnick, Andy Junkins, Ben Richland, Brooke Obscura, Chaps My Ass, Chris Callie, Colton Bredlau, Dan Norman, Derek Sigmund, Ian T. Clark, Jacob Nahin, Jason Thompson, Jawar Hello, Jill Grote, Johnny Five, Jordan Sloat, Jose Villalobos, Joseph Jury, Justin Childress, Cody Gibson, Lindsay Hartz, Marshall Thompson, Megan S., Michael Anderson, Nintendo 101, Pat Roberts, Paul at Drunk on Mako, Pratable, Rob McCann, Bobby Mac 265, Roger Reichert, Russell Sayer, Sarah McCarthy, Scott Matthews, Smithy Poo, Tux DC, Wham Bam Sam the Gaming Man, Zach Marcus, and Zachary Pliggy. Because of your support, I'm able to continue doing this podcast and creating bonus content. Thank you so much for listening, and thank you so much for continuing to support this show.